Charles Darwin, 19th-century English naturalist, geologist, and biologist. Favorite pastime? Developing the theory of evolution. Party trick? Giant tortoise racing on the Galapagos Islands. Captain Barbossa, historically based 21st century fictional character from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Favorite pastime? Training monkeys. Party trick? Eating whole bushels of apples. And finally, Jesus Christ. First century Jewish preacher and religious leader. Favorite pastime? Being the incarnation of the Son of God. Party trick? Changing water into wine. Now you might be asking, what could such seemingly different historic icons have in common? And the answer is a simple but powerful binding force that is at the core of each of these identities. Yes, I'm talking about the beard. This is a game called A Boy and His Beard. This game was intriguing to me for a number of reasons. First, I asked myself, why is he a boy with a beard and not a man and his beard? How did he get his beard? Is it real? Is it fake? And why is his beard sentient? A lot of these questions made me think about the significance of beards in culture, and how we recognize beards as representing something other than just facial hair. From the questions of how the kid got the beard, I started thinking about why he had a beard. What was the importance of having a beard? What was the history of this beard? Turns out that there is a vast and interesting history of beards that has been investigated by a number of historians who are as eager as I was to uncover the queries about the beard. The bulk of the research that I found focuses on jolly old England. These studies show fascinating changes in how the beard, shaving, and specifically masculinity, has over the span of 3 centuries undergone a variety of changes and trends. So let's start with the Renaissance. Beards were a big deal in the Renaissance. Anybody who was anybody had a beard in the Renaissance. This guy had a beard, that guy had a beard. All these guys had beards. It was an age where beards could flourish and raise tiny beard families, where fundraising for beard colleges were plentiful, and beards were encouraged to be the best beards that they could beard. I mean, just look at them! This is a painting of the Somerset House Conference from 1604. These dudes had their collars popped and their beards on lock. The styles of beard were plentiful. For example, you had this square-cut beard worn by Lord Robert Essex, who was unfortunately a government subverter and traitor to the crown. And another distinguishing beard was the stiletto beard worn by, well, the later to be beheaded Charles I. Unfortunately, his beard was not a weapon like that of beard boys, otherwise he may have escaped beheading for treason. And lastly, though he was imprisoned in the Tower of London for committing adultery with Anne Boleyn, who was the unfortunate second wife of King Henry VIII, the poet Sir Thomas Wyatt wore the sugarloaf. He couldn't resist Anne's beauty, and she couldn't resist his sweet, sweet beard. But why did these guys all sport such marvelous beards? Essentially, scholars and historians agree that in the Renaissance, wearing a beard was a sign of masculinity and almost a rite of passage. Essentially, being able to grow a beard represented your change from a boy to a man. Which begs the question, why does this boy have a beard in this game? However, beard acted not just as a symbol, it was also part of the body of your anatomy. But to be clear, Renaissance scientists did not have a very good understanding of the body. For example, the system of medicine used was called humoral theory, was a system of medicine that detailed the makeup and workings of the human body. This was proposed by ancient Greek and Roman physicians and philosophers, who believed if you had too much or too little of any of your 4 bodily fluids, blood, yellow bile, black bile, or phlegm, they believe this directly influenced the temperament and health of your body. That's right, this was developed by ancient Greek physicians, so that is the 5th century BCE. This theory developed in the 5th century before Common Era, dominated Western medical thinking for more than 2,000 years. That means that the understanding of the body was incredibly slow to advance in Western science. Even though in the Renaissance and up to the Enlightenment period, we had amazing forward-thinking theories about the universe, like that the center of the world wasn't the Earth, but the sun. Europeans had shipbuilding technology that allowed them to sail across the world to find new lands. New technology like the movable type printing press allowed for the revolutionary production of printed material and thus the movement of information at an unprecedented scale. Despite all of these amazing developments and innovations, up until the 19th century, physicians believed that the production of facial hair was connected to the production of semen, believing that beards were a form of excretion that resulted from the heat out of your testicles rise and becoming a visible representation of your generative potential. In other words, your ability as a man to produce offspring depended on how the heat from your balls came out your face. This was medical science. Despite this shockingly bad understanding of facial hair, the beard had a very good run up until about the 18th century. And this was when the beard came under threat by the only thing that can really cut a beard's spirit. And literally cut it. I'm talking about razors. The manufacture of new and better steel and more easy to use razors combined with a targeting of individual consumers instead of barbershops. This allowed people to shave at home in an easy and safe way. But now the act of shaving became enmeshed with this complex web of meanings that was born out of this new technology, but also out of the construction of what is called polite society. Polite culture was developed primarily by the upper classes, and it essentially entailed that polite men and women needed to conform to socially acceptable ideals of behavior, speaking, and dress. Men were encouraged to soften their countenance and refine their manners to engage in stimulating conversation with women. In addition to manners, a gentleman needed to look the part. Though shaving softened the features of a man's face, which might be associated with being effeminate or more womanlike, the removal of facial hair implied control, discipline, and self-mastery, and thus remained a very masculine pursuit. This became the new masculine ideal of the upper classes, and when it was popularized, was also driven by consumerism. However, a century later, the beard was back with a vengeance. In fact, in the Victorian period, there was even a beard movement. By the mid-19th century, the British Empire was at its full peak of power, and the pride of their nation was their military. Often, with little time in the field to shave, regiments began to wear facial hair like beards and moustaches, which became a symbol of this innate manliness linked to military pride. This rugged masculinity countered the previous polite masculinity, became a new symbol of the freedom and rugged masculine ideal. Fashions for facial hair seemed to change more rapidly in the 20th century. In the 1910s and 1920s, the fashion for mustaches was most popular. By the 40s and 50s, a clean-shaven look was partially favored, before the stunning badger beards came back in the 60s and 70s. These changes show that the beard had kind of a history of its own, but it was always linked to the way that men have experienced their own gender and sexuality, and how society and cultural values have sometimes intervened in the construction of particular male appearance. Overall, creating a game where a boy and his beard fight against other men who are bearded, like pirates, lumberjacks, biker gangs, and Vikings, seems to embrace this ideal of rugged masculinity. However, is it really an ideal if it's the beard? Giving the beard more personality than the boy fits kind of with this history of beardedness. The beard has had a tough life, has faced many different phases in history, has been appreciated, but also torn down. In the end, the question remains, is it really a boy and his beard, or is it a beard and his boy?